walk alone. Goddamn, these city lights, they just shine so bright. They block the stars at night. The stars at night. I thought one day they'd show me the way when. Show me the way home. Just a man, 24. Thought this world could offer so much more.
Hello, everybody out there. Welcome back to the Slackline Quote of the Day broadcast. You are here with the boss.
The boss is coming.
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you.
We are once again chatting quotes and things of that nature. Gonna break it down. Coming at you from Vancouver, Canada. It is a real shitty day outside. Raining pretty hard. Took the puppy for a walk and he was soaking wet, and neither of us like that because he's now wet and stinky. But the weed is burning, the coffee is kind of lukewarm, and we are getting into it today. Our sponsor today is Superficial Rabbit Hole. Tired of trying to decide between what's real and fake? Presidents, porn stars, and Putin. It's too much. I agree, Timmy. Come to where we'll send you on an endless string of celebrity interviews and meaningless top 10 lists. Superficial Rabbit Hole. It's escapism at its finest. That is our sponsor, Superficial Rabbit Hole. Thank you to them for bringing us our quote today. Throwing it back to 1865 for Throwback Thursday with a quote from Josh Billings, U.S. humorist. As scarce as the truth is, the supply has always been in excess of demand. That is Josh Billings from Aphorisms of Josh Billings, his sayings, 1865. We bring you that quote today because a comment I made yesterday in regards to the spread of misinformation as compared to the past and now. Obviously, there's a lot of spread of misinformation now. Talk about fake news and misinformation, and it is rampant and pervasive, as we see with, the quote-unquote successes of Cambridge Analytica and stuff like that. But the truth is also readily available, and that wasn't the case a long time ago. A long time ago, the only access people had to information was like pastors, maybe a school teacher in their local communities, and like in the cities they had like newspapers and stuff. But I mean, even those sources weren't as scrutinized as they are today. So while there is much more misinformation, I'm not sure that it is much more in comparison to what is readily available as truthful information. In the past, I think the ratio of misinformation to truth, was obviously much higher in regards to scientific truths and stuff like that, but even to personal truths on, what people did and their stories and stuff. The ratio of accuracy to inaccuracy, whether purposeful is not or not, it was probably much higher. So what this quote I think says is that it's always been. I think what this quote says is that the truth has always been in excess of demand. Even back then, when you're barely talking about electricity and that type of thing. The truth is always a thing. It's always real. It's always a truth or certainty, and whether we know it or not, it's there. And so it's always in excess of demand. But, it kind of rings more true now, where we have truths, we have certainties, not just scientifically in the realm of our own universe, but certainties about stories, truths, or at least evidence of very obvious things, like these investigations into the U.S. Political issues, like the investigations into Russian hacking, not just in the U.S. but all over the world, and this Cambridge Analytica stuff that is voter manipulation on a mass scale. These things, they are out there now, and whether people want to believe them or not is now what the question is. And with all of this truth readily available, it doesn't take long to do a little research and find the sources of info and determine if they're credible. But can or will we determine? A lot of people consider religious leaders or family members as credible sources of information when they really just aren't. I mean, they might be, but whatever anybody tells you to your face or whatever you read online or whatever, I mean, you have to go check it if you want to believe it to be true. That doesn't mean that you don't believe people when they tell you things. It just means that you want to confirm it. It's not an insult to say to be like, oh yeah, that's interesting, yeah, I'll check that out, versus you're right. But we have the ability to surround ourselves with stuff that agrees with us, whether it's true or not. I didn't even know what Breitbart or InfoWars was until a couple years ago. And so am I a victim of it? Probably a bit, but I wouldn't consider those to be credible sources. And anyone who cited them to be credible would be wrong. But those people might think that the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times aren't credible. And so what do you do with that? And I mean, in certain points they aren't, right? They've made mistakes, but they are, but they do have oversight, and they do have an obligation and a reason to correct their inaccuracies, or at least they did until people apparently stopped caring about it. So now we're at a point where, you've always had to check those things. Reading the article in the Wall Street Journal is not enough, right? You have to dig into the person that they've talked to, or the paper that they are citing, or whatever it is, the article that they looked at in the Economist or something along those lines. It's important to go and check in those things. And it's so fucking easy. It sounds boring, but it's 4 clicks of your mouse and you can read, the scientific journal that this came from, or the economic thesis behind this, or whatever. And you don't have to read the whole thing. There's abstracts and cliff notes, and that's what the articles are for. So you don't have to read through the whole thing. That's why the journalists have gone through and made their articles. But it is important to go and make sure that those come from credible things. And I mean, if you want to read through the whole thing, all the power to you. I mean, as we see with something like Cambridge Analytica, it seemed relatively easy to uncover that issue once somebody actually tried. I mean, you show up looking fancy with some hidden cameras, and boom, you have this high level corruption on display. And so what are we going to do with that information now? We have a history of learning these things and just dismissing it or forgetting about it. I rewatched the John Oliver interview with Edward Snowden yesterday, and that was from a few years ago. And that, it's shocking how scary and intrusive the government is, and how much people are actually upset about it, but don't really think that it's a real thing. Or have, convinced ourselves that it's okay. That Apple always knows where I am. Maybe I even feel safer with that, it's an interesting sort of conundrum. Do I feel safer because people know where I am and who I am, and if something happens to me, people can know about it quickly? Or I can notify people quickly? It's kind of a strange philosophical question, you know? If you applied it to 1980s outlook on what computers and stuff like that were, and what government surveillance and things like that meant, then yeah, it would be really scary and intrusive. And it is scary and intrusive, mostly because it can be hacked by people who are, nefarious. Yeah, I know people that have been hacked. I've been hacked. Well, I don't think I've been hacked. Have I been hacked? Yeah, I had somebody charge my credit card with something. And it's weird because you don't think that you're vulnerable to that stuff, mostly because you're not worth it. Like, for me anyways, I'm like, yeah, okay, hack into my bank account. Like, I don't see why you would want to do that. There's nothing in there for you. In my mind, if you have the ability to do something like that, why wouldn't you target like people with billions of dollars? I mean, those people probably tend to pay for high level security and that type of thing, and maybe that's just sort of a revenge fantasy. However you want to classify that, it's more of a plot of a movie than anything else. That would be an interesting thing to see. I wonder how that would play out. Like a Robin Hood type thing where somebody went and ended up, stealing billions of dollars from wealthy people and somehow redistributing it just like wirelessly to people. That would be interesting. Anyways, that's kind of beside the point. So back to the question. I mean, like, what are we gonna do with this revelation of how we are all being manipulated at a high level purposely? Like, I think we kind of all thought that it was happening, mostly because we were letting it happen, as far as like, oh well, yeah, I do only watch things that are that agree with me and stuff. We thought it was like a psychological problem with us, which it partially is. But that psychological issue with humanity is being exploited now to our detriment, which is, really, really, it's really sort of frightening. Like, how can we stand up to it? It's not really I mean, we can jail these people and we can work harder or make personal promises to, work harder to seek out the truth. But like, let's be honest, like, nobody's doing that. Nobody cares that much. That was kind of the point of the John Oliver segment with Edward Snowden, was just like, people don't care. People cared for a few months and forgot about it. It kind of seems to be our issue over and over again. And then we look back in history and go like, oh, yeah, that was a mistake then. Maybe we should rectify that now. And sometimes we do, but the process is made much slower for not acting when things actually happen. So, I don't know. A bigger problem is that the people that are in the most powerful positions are the ones that are being manipulated and manipulating people. And so, I mean, the President of the United States has no incentive to have Cambridge Analytica investigated or anything like that, because he's one of the culprits of it. And perhaps even, the UK with Theresa May, like, and the Brexit issue, like, that was supposedly maybe manipulated by this group as well. The other most powerful people on the planet, Putin, is apparently, or, kind of obviously, the one that's manipulating all of it. And yeah, I mean, all that's kind of left for salvation as far as like power and like, I don't know, threat of military force is China. And I'm not really sure how they feel about this and all this stuff, or how it's affecting them. I should maybe take a look into that, and maybe we can talk about that for our Friday episode. But yeah, we'll end that here for today. That quote again is from Josh Billings, U.S. humorist, Throwback Thursday to 1865. As scarce as the truth is, the supply has always been in excess of demand. Josh Billings, U.S. humorist. That quote brought to us by Superficial Rabbit Hole. Tired of trying to decide between what's real or fake? Presidents, porn stars, and Putin. It's too much. I agree, Timmy. Come to Superficial Rabbit Hole, where we'll send you on an endless string of celebrity interviews and meaningless top 10 lists. Superficial Rabbit Hole, where you can forget about the real world and enjoy yourself in a fantasy realm. That is our sponsor, Superficial Rabbit Hole. A little bleak, a little... Thanks again to Crooked Spies for providing their tunes for us today. Make sure you are checking out the Slack line on Instagram at the.slack.line, on Twitter at slackline_radio, and on YouTube and iTunes at the Slackline Podcast. You have been listening to The Boss.
The boss is coming! That's a made-up, dumb fairy tale name, you...
Thanks to anybody who's been paying attention, and happy Thursday. We will see you tomorrow.
I swear you're better off.